Earlier, Niger's military leaders have warned against any armed intervention in the country by the leaders of the sub-region following an emergency meeting of the Economic Community of West African States in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Niger's military spokesman, Colonel Amadu Abdramane, says that the objective of the ECOWAS meeting was to approve a plan of aggression against Niger through an imminent military intervention in Niamey in collaboration with other African countries that are non-members of ECOWAS and certain Western countries. They reminded ECOWAS of the military's firm determination to defend our homeland. General Abdurrahmane Chiani, the chief of Niger's presidential guard, declared himself leader, while the country's elected president, Mohamed Bazoum, is still being held by the military since the coup took place last week. Let's discuss this issue further as we're now being joined by Professor Efem Ubi, who is the acting director of research and studies at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, NIAA, from our Lagos studios. And we also have in Abuja a rise analyst, Dr. Constance Ikokwu. Very warm welcome to Newsnight. These are trying times once again for the West African sub-region, its people and the people of Niger. But let me start with you, Professor Efem. The coup in Niger is said to be the first time the economic community has threatened to take military action against any coupists or coup plotters. How far-reaching will this go with one of the resolutions of the ECOWAS leaders today in Abuja?
Thank you for having me. I think I will start by saying that the Economic Community of West African States will have to really tread with caution. You know, there are other options available. Military intervention should be the last of the last option. Or I would like to say that if possible, it shouldn't even come into the picture. You know, if you look at many of the constitutions of the 15 member states, I think you see the principles of non-intervention. Now, the question I'm beginning to ask is, under what guise will ECOWAS intervene in Niger? If you look at the principles that governs intervention, humanitarian intervention, or the responsibility to protect, eventually, it talks about the fact that it is either pogrom is taking place in that nation or genocide is taking place. That is when nations could intervene in order to stem the genocide that is ongoing in any country. And so now that they are taking an option of non-intervention, I mean, of intervening in the coup in Mali, you know, to restore democracy, I wonder how that is going to be feasible, but we have to await the outcome of the Chief of Defense Staff of the community to know what the outcome is, to see if they actually buy the idea of military intervention. But all said, nobody is in support of the military incursion into politics. At this time of the globe, you know, if you look at the post-modern era or the post-postmodern era, military incursions into politics shouldn't be seen, you know. Democracy remains the best form of government, and we expect that every country within the region and the continent at large should imbibe democracy and practice democracy, you know. But much more importantly, for me, it's not actually the intervention too. What I've been worried about is we should actually look at the root cause of the problem. What is bringing the military back? You know, after the third wave of democracy in the 90s, a lot of countries were imbibing democracy. Everybody was happy. You know, there was jubilation everywhere. So why are the military coming back? I think we should begin to look at the root cause of the problems that are causing the resurgence of military coups in Africa.
All right,
Like
Prof.
I said,
I'll come back to you.
intervention should be one
You
of the
seem to
last
be-
options for
yeah,
me.
Prof, you seem to be answering my questions already, and the reason is not far-fetched as the director of research and studies. But let me come to Dr. Constance. Yes, a lot of caution must be taken. ECOWAS has no standing force right now, as it used to have in the 90s during the pogrom in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And some generals are warning that Nigeria really should tread cautiously against any military action against the coup plotters, because it may spell doom for Nigeria. That is, ISWA, for example, will be let loose, knowing that Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso have been serving as buffers to the Nigerian border, blocking, the incursion by these terrorists, as you would say. Do you agree to that, Dr. Constance?
Well, the thing to say is that ECOWAS has given a standard response to the situation at hand, condemning the coup and the coup plotters, asking for restoration of democracy and the release of the president, President Bazoum. But let's go again to the underlying causes and the intervention, as you mentioned. If you begin to intervene in this country, how many countries will you intervene? I mean, across West Africa, for instance, there have been, since 2013, over 60 attempts at coup. 60% of the attempts at coup in Africa has been in West Africa. So when you begin to talk about intervention, are you going to do that in Mali? Are you going to do that in Chad? Are you going to do that in Burkina Faso? Are you going to do that in Guinea-Conakry? So yes, the same level of energy that they have used to condemn this coup should be channeled towards addressing the underlying causes of this coup and instability in the region. I mean, people are saying that, okay, for instance, you have democracy. Democracy is supposed to deliver results and improve the lives of people. But in this so-called democracy we are talking about, the practice is not being felt by the people. You have election riggers who rig elections and come into power. You have live presidents who do not want to move. You have people who are in power and want to extend their tenures. You have all of this. So these are things that ECOWAS should channel its energy towards, because those are important. But beyond this carefully crafted response, there's also the issue of the problems that we're facing as a region. So you have, for instance, when you look at all these countries, they are Francophone, right? So there is a huge anti-France sentiment sweeping across the continent. So they're doing this to get France out of their way. And then there are the jihadist wars that are causing problems, decimating populations, decimating economies. You have to deal with that. And then there is the foreign interventions or interest, renewed scramble for Africa. Russia is there, China is there. You have the United States, France, and the European Union. And then you have the private military contractors who are ever ready to jump into the mix. It's a lot of things going on at the same time. So yes, treading with caution is very important.
All right, Prof, would come to, some of the socio political and economic sanctions already imposed, on Niger and around Nigerian borders in Ilela, Sokoto State, some in Kebbi, another one in Kebbi. The border closure is already being enforced, and we have our correspondent in Sokoto who is reporting that visual is not ready because of the network problem. But the sanctions imposed by ECOWAS leaders have started taking a snowball effect on not only Niger, but Nigeria, with borders, communities already counting their losses. Foodstuffs, the intertrades cannot go on again. The consequential effect can be overwhelming, don't you think so?
Yes, the impact of the sanctions will be overwhelming. But first, let's look at the Niger Republic itself. you know, these sanctions, most of them are economic sanctions. And sometimes I get worried, you know, when you impose economic sanctions on a country, because it's the common people, the citizens that actually feel the impact of these sanctions negatively, and it impacts on them, you know, in a whole lot of ways. And so sometimes I feel, you know, some sanctions should be more of political than economic, because the economic has a wider reach, you know, to the peripheries. Now, with regards to the closure of border, it's going to affect trade. We have a lot of trade ongoing between Nigeria and Niger. We have a lot of trade going between Nigeria and our immediate neighbors around. And so when you close the border, that aspect of trade will be, you know, impacted upon negatively, because even the Nigerian exporters, you know, traders who export to Niger will not be able to do any business with the country. I think we have to, you know, like we have all said, tread with caution. Now, let me take, for instance, the United States is even very cautious in actually referring to what has taken place in Niger as a coup. The United States is one of Niger's ally. As a matter of fact, $500 million of aid has already been given to Niger. They are their closest ally in terms of combating insecurity within the region. And you see, they are also treading with caution, because once they call what has taken place in Niger a coup, that means they have to cut their operation and military assistance to Niger. And so ECOWAS too, we should look at all the impact. Now, we initially talked about intervention. Intervention wasn't the option for Mali, for Burkina Faso, for Guinea, and the three countries prior to Niger. Now, how come you're not asking for, the ECOWAS is asking for intervention in Niger? Now, don't you think that now this will actually form another alliance between the four, Niger, Burkina Faso, Guinea, and Mali? You know, so now if there's an intervention, don't you think this would now create another chaos within the Sahel, within Nigeria's border? And you know, Niger is our partner when it comes to fighting insecurity. And so I think there's a whole lot of ways, you know, the sanctions that will impact on Nigeria as well as Niger. But, you know, as a matter of fact, like we have said, you know, coup is not something that we should encourage. So whatever it takes to eradicate military purchase, we have to do that, you know. And so remember, over the last couple of years, a lot of arguments by analysts, by scholars, that African Union is a toothless bulldog, ECOWAS is a toothless bulldog. I think, and that is why I'm sure the chairman of ECOWAS and our president himself has said it is not business as usual. We have to take strong measures against military purchase or unconstitutional change of government in Africa and within this region. And so I think that is why they have taken this option. But like I said, we should start with softer measures, negotiations, arbitration, mediations. You know, we should send high-level delegations, international public persons, to see how they could discuss some form of remedies for Niger in order to pave way for Mohamed Bazoum to come back as a president of Niger. And so we should look at various options before we now take the options of interventions, which is actually supposed to be the last option.
Dr. Constance, let me ask you, if can the most benevolent military regime be better than a skewed, you know, democratic government with obvious electoral inadequacies?
That's a difficult one. It's not black and white, right? So many people would prefer a democratic government, but a democracy that is working, that is functioning, not a democracy where elections are not done rightly and people impose themselves on the masses. So, I mean, people have given instances of Libya, for instance, that he was a benevolent dictator. The quality of life in Libya was very high, although you could argue that civil liberties were limited. whatever be the case, I think people would prefer a situation where there are civil liberties, there is freedom, they have their human rights, and they can do whatever they want to do, and then the government is not limited to a family. Because when you look across West Africa, for instance, you have some, not only West Africa, you have countries where the power passes from the father to the son. Nobody wants to do that in a country. It's not your clan, it is an entire country. But going back to what is happening, when you look at all these countries, there is a common thread. Most of them are Francophone, so ruled by former colonial power France. And when you see the resentment on ground, there's a huge anti-France sentiment. And it is because of a couple of reasons. They believe that most of the economic agreements do not favor them, and then it doesn't bring development to them. So they want most of these countries to be out of their domain. And then there is also the cultural imposition, there is the exploitation of resources that they think does not work in their interest. So these are issues that the AU and ECOWAS need to look at more closely. You need to provide economic prosperity in these countries. You need to banish poverty. You need to promote transparency. You need to promote good governance. And then the states, the institutions have to be strengthened. The state has to be strong. If the state is weak, this is what you get.
Thank you very much. Prof, let's come to you quickly before we're asked to round up. Niger is a country of 26 million citizens. You talked about the international interests, US, France, EU. EU has stopped its budgetary aid of $554 million. But this is a country rich in uranium, in gold, and other natural resources, but yet its poverty index is number 1 or number 2 in the world. Should it be so? What are the reasons for the incessant or the gradual creeping back of coups, insurrection in West Africa?
Yes, since Niger is our case study, you have just mentioned the population of Niger. Then the GDP growth rate is 1.4, and when you look at the corruption index, it is 123 over 180 in terms of numbers ranking. Now the score is 32 over 100, and poverty level is about 38%. You know, so you find out that this might be just one of the reasons for the disenchantment, for the unhappiness, you know, that has caused the military purge in the country. Now, there are other factors, you know, Dr. Constance has even listed a whole lot: corruption, maladministration, weak economy. We also have unemployment, extreme poverty, failure of liberal democracy in many respects, and you know there have been a lot of arguments that you know the policies, the Western policies, liberal policies that are actually the West asks the developing world, precisely Africa, to implement, are actually not a fit for the society. Now, so people have been asking, you know, for an identity that we have to create based on our own social, political or social structural dynamics, you know, something that fits the system, you know, the domestic politics. That means, you know, whatever policies we are being asked to implement, we should look at how it is fit into the system, what we should adapt. You know, we don't have to adopt everything hook, line, and sinker and implement. Now, the problem is this, you know, when you adopt policies that are not, that are alien to the system, it creates a whole lot of problems. You know, when you try to fuse an alien practice, there is that explosion. You know, if we go to the natural sciences, you see how the catastrophic effect of the nuclear bomb, you know, when you're trying to fuse an atom together, you know, and they are repelling. But when you use that force to fuse it, that is what causes the chaos, the catastrophic blast that you feel. And that's exactly what is happening in Africa. And so I think the truth is that, and this remains the truth, is that our leaders actually know the problem. But the problem there for them, or the challenge for them, is that of implementation, that of commitment, that of willingness, that political will to implement policies that are people-oriented, policies that are development-focused, policies that will give succor to the citizens. We need infrastructure. We don't have infrastructure. We need to upgrade, and you see how much it costs to upgrade the infrastructure. I know it's a very tall order. Development is not just a one-day thing. For instance, China took 100 years to get to where it is. It took 100 years, a decade, for China to be modernized. And so there are lessons we could learn from countries like China, from the Asian tigers. And when we learn from those lessons, we take what we need for the system. We adopt and adapt what we need, that fits into our system, and create a very sound political scenario, friendly business environment, that could create succor and give the citizens the sense of belonging.
And accelerate development. Sorry, I just need...
and inclusiveness.
Yes, I just need to come in.
I think that those are the things we really need.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Prof. Lastly, Dr. Constance, when you look at the communique issued by ECOWAS and the reality on the ground, for example, the funding of a standing army that can serve as an interventionist force or instrument in, Niger and any other country, that goes against the letter and spirit of the region or the sub-region. How would you reconcile, the stance of the coup leaders, the ECOWAS leaders, and the rest?
The thing is, a lot of these African countries, especially in West Africa, are mostly floated by Nigeria. And what I mean by that is that Nigeria helps most of these countries financially because they are in tough financial situation. And so we carry a lot already. I don't know how a standing force will work, except you're saying that there would be foreign help, with these foreign countries, the EU, the United States. I mean, they're always ready to give some kind of financial assistance to African countries in this regard. But then when you accept money, then you have to accept other conditions that they have to give to you. The thing to note, though, is that many African leaders are not listening to their people. And many of those countries, citizens feel like their leaders are puppets. Their leaders are there to work for other people and not for them. So we have to begin to listen to our people. This is a warning. This is a warning. I mean, what is going on across West Africa is a warning to many African countries. It is a problem for us. It could be more catastrophic than this. So we really need to get it together, the AU and ECOWAS and other regional bodies, and do something seriously about this.
Thank you so very much. No better place for you to have dropped the anchor there on this ECOWAS resolution today in Abuja. Professor Efem Ubi, Assistant Director of Research and Studies, Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Thanks very much for coming on Newsnight. And Dr. Constance Ikokwu, very warm appreciation for being part of Newsnight.
You're welcome.